What would drive a revolutionary leader to secretly meet the man who bathed his homeland in blood? The morning sun barely crested over the Burkinabe horizon when the encrypted message arrived. It bore no seal, no signature, only coordinates and a time. Yet to President Ibrahim Traoré, the meaning was as loud as cannon fire. The warlord known only as Kundari was summoning him. Kundari, the butcher of Gao, the ghost of Sahel, a man whose name mothers whispered as warning and soldiers feared like death itself. To most of the world, the idea that Traoré would even consider meeting such a man was unthinkable. After all, Kundari was responsible for thousands of deaths across Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. He had razed villages to ash, trafficked children into armed militias, and built his empire of blood across an arc of suffering. And yet, here he was, reaching out directly to the one man who had vowed to destroy him. Inside the presidential compound, no one else knew, not even his closest advisors. Traoré didn't trust anyone with this. His instincts, sharpened by battle, betrayal, and the weight of leadership, told him this meeting could change everything. But whether it would end in peace or death, he didn't yet know. He chose to travel alone. He disguised himself in the tattered garb of a traveling merchant, complete with a worn turban and dusty sandals. His only companion was a single old jeep and a satellite phone with its tracker disabled. 4 or 5 hours, he drove into the heart of a no-man's land, through silent forests and abandoned checkpoints, where the only sound was the crunch of gravel and the wind whispering through burned-out ruins. When he finally arrived, it was dusk. A lone wooden structure stood at the meeting point, what looked like an old colonial outpost, long since forgotten. As Traoré approached the door, the air felt thick with history and dread. This was no battlefield. This was a chamber of reckoning. Inside sat Kundari, older now, but still exuding the same eerie calm he was known for. His eyes were sharp, almost amused, as if he'd expected the president to decline, but delighted that he hadn't. Around him sat 4 of his most brutal lieutenants, each one responsible for unspeakable crimes, and each watching Traoré like a hawk circling prey. "You came," Kundari said, his voice a rasp with smoke and sand. "I didn't come to kneel," Traoré replied. Kundari laughed, a sound that felt like gravel in a steel drum. "No, I didn't think you would. But you did come. That's enough for now." What followed was a conversation no historian would ever record. Traoré demanded answers. Why the massacres? Why the betrayal of his own people? Why now? Kundari, in turn, offered not excuses, but revelations. He claimed that he, too, had once fought for freedom. But somewhere along the way, he realized freedom was a myth sold by elites to the desperate, that only power could protect the people, and he had become a monster to protect them from worse monsters. The air grew heavier with every word. And then, just as Traoré was about to walk away, Kundari said something that made him stop cold. "I know who's funding the insurgencies on your borders. And it's not who you think." The moment those words left Kundari's mouth, Traoré's breath caught in his chest. "I know who's funding the insurgencies on your borders. And it's not who you think." The warlord wasn't bluffing. His face, hardened by decades of desert warfare, showed no pleasure, no theatrics, just a deadly certainty that this information, this truth, would rattle the very foundations of Burkina Faso's fragile stability. Traoré had come prepared for manipulation. What he wasn't prepared for was the possibility that his own house was infected. Kundari leaned forward, resting his elbows on the splintered table. "I didn't ask for this meeting to confess. I asked for it because I don't want to die ignorant, and I won't let men in suits who've never held a rifle rewrite my legacy." Traoré narrowed his eyes. "Then talk." And talk he did. According to Kundari, a senior official within Traoré's own cabinet, someone the president had elevated himself, had been brokering secret deals with foreign defense contractors. These deals weren't just about arms. They were about destabilization. For every border clash that spiraled into chaos, for every village driven into refugee status, certain international partners profited. And the one orchestrating it all from inside the palace? A man named Seydou Mariko, Traoré's Minister of National Security. Mariko had been with Traoré from the start. He was a decorated ex-intelligence chief, once tortured under a previous regime for refusing to betray the revolution. Or so everyone believed. Traoré had always seen him as a loyal operator, ruthless when needed, but committed to the sovereignty of Burkina Faso. Now, if Kandari was to be believed, Mariko wasn't just a mole, he was a kingmaker in a foreign-backed strategy to keep Burkina Faso in a state of permanent volatility. Traoré didn't show it, but his stomach turned. Still, he knew the warlord could be playing a deeper game. And what do you want in exchange for this accusation? Kandari smirked. Not freedom. I know my sins, but I want a ceasefire. My forces will retreat from the northern triangle. No bloodshed. You let me disappear. I'll give you proof. Real proof. Traoré's mind raced. Accepting Kandari's offer could mean peace, or political suicide if it became public. But ignoring it? That risked leaving a knife inside his own ribcage, wielded by someone he trusted more than anyone. He nodded slowly. 3 days. That's all I'll give you. Kandari raised his palm, and one of his men handed Traoré a black dossier, weathered dusty, but stamped with the seal of Burkina Faso's own intelligence agency. As Traoré departed into the night, every mile between him and that warlord felt like a lifetime. The weight of that dossier sat on the seat beside him like a second passenger. He didn't open it until he was back in the capital, inside a secure bunker beneath the presidential palace. What he found made his blood run cold. Photos of Mariko in Dubai, signing documents with arms dealers linked to a NATO-adjacent private firm, wire transfers that routed through shell companies in Lagos, Casablanca, and Geneva, surveillance images of hush-hush meetings at the foreign embassies of 2 Western nations, and worst of all, a transcript of a call, recorded by one of Kandari's own men, in which Mariko casually suggested allowing an insurgent raid on a border town to go unchecked to justify a new arms shipment. The betrayal wasn't just political. It was surgical, brutal, and ongoing. Traoré didn't sleep that night, nor the next. Instead, he watched Mariko from a distance, observing briefing generals, sitting beside him during state dinners, comforting grieving families at funerals caused by insurgent violence he may have orchestrated. The man was a ghost in plain sight, and yet, to confront him openly risked exposing the country's vulnerability. There were already whispers of coups in neighboring states, foreign media twisting his leadership into a caricature of military rule. If the scandal broke, if the public learned their protector was feeding the enemy, Burkina Faso could erupt from within. So Traoré made a decision. He would test Mariko. He set a trap, a fabricated report of a high-level arms shipment moving through the region of Hambori. He ensured only 3 people saw it, Mariko among them. Within 24 hours, the insurgents launched a surprise attack on that exact route. A coincidence? Unlikely. It was the final confirmation Traoré needed. But he wouldn't arrest Mariko with cameras rolling. He had another plan, something even more audacious than the secret meeting with Kandari. A trap not for a warlord, but for a traitor wearing a suit hidden inside the walls of the Republic. Because some enemies don't storm your gates. They sit at your table. Traoré knew that removing Mariko couldn't be done with arrests and press conferences. No media spin, no formal accusations. This wasn't about justice. It was about surgical survival. The enemy was too embedded, too protected. If he made one wrong move, the betrayal would multiply, and the state itself could collapse. So he designed a ghost operation. The code name, Operation Nut Tateo, Total Night. For 72 hours, Traoré met in absolute secrecy with a trusted core of 6 people, none of whom knew each other were involved. Each had been vetted not only for loyalty, but for pain. They were men and women who had lost family to insurgent attacks. People who had no more illusions about politics, only purpose. He gave them a chilling command. We take him down in the dark. The world will wake up to a different reality. The plan was layered with misdirection. It began with a fake emergency security summit, one that Mariko was instructed to chair alone in Traoré's absence. The president claimed to be flying to Niamey for an emergency ECOWAS briefing on border militias. In truth, he never left the country. He went underground, literally, into the decommissioned military tunnels beneath the palace, watching events unfold through a private command center only he controlled. At exactly 2:17 a.m., electricity to Sector 3 of the presidential compound was cut. Not enough to cause panic, just enough to disable cameras, locks, and surveillance in one specific wing of the palace, the National Security Operations Room, where Mariko was reviewing emergency protocols. At 2:21, for operatives entered in full blackout gear. No uniforms, no insignias, no trace. They moved silently through smoke screens and night vision lenses until they reached Mariko's office. He was still inside, surrounded by documents he believed were top secret. What he didn't know was that every piece of paper on that desk, every file on his laptop, had been planted by Traoré. They didn't kill him. That would have been too easy. They extracted him. By 3:09 a.m., Mariko was inside a soundproof interrogation room beneath the old barracks, his location known only to Traoré and 2 trusted legal aides. The conversation that followed was recorded, but never broadcast. It was not rage that filled the air, but an eerie, silent devastation. Mariko didn't deny the allegations. He simply whispered, "You think I'm the only one?" Traoré didn't flinch. "No, but you're the first." What followed was confession that rewrote the entire internal map of Burkina Faso's political structure. Mariko named 10 others, 3 ministers, 2 intelligence officers, a former military contractor, now working inside the Ministry of Energy, and even a presidential advisor, a man who had dined with Traoré's family just 2 nights before. They weren't all traitors in the traditional sense. Some were opportunists. Others, scared men who believed allying with foreign power brokers would preserve peace. But in doing so, they had fed the insurgencies Traoré was trying to eliminate. They had, in his eyes, killed with clean hands. But it wasn't over. With Mariko neutralized, Traoré executed the second phase of his plan, a purge so quiet it didn't make international headlines until days later. At precisely 7 a.m., coordinated teams arrested 6 individuals across 3 government departments. There were no public statements, just silence, like the system itself had closed in on the infection and cauterized it from within. And then, without warning, President Ibrahim Traoré emerged live on national television. His eyes were hard, his uniform crisp, his voice steady, though the room knew it trembled beneath. We were infiltrated, from the inside, by men whose greed endangered our sovereignty. They believed our silence would protect them. They were wrong. He never mentioned Mariko by name. He didn't have to. The people already knew. But what came next shocked even his inner circle. "I met with Kandari," Traoré declared. "I met with the man we call the enemy, not to make peace with a warlord, but to reveal the war within our walls. And what I found was worse than I imagined." The speech lasted only 4 minutes. But by its end, the entire Sahel was awake. Across West Africa, leaders scrambled to analyze what Traoré meant. Was it confession, a threat, or a message to unseen forces? In truth, it was all 3. But within Burkina Faso, a strange calm settled. The insurgent attack slowed. The people, though shocked by the revelations, began to believe that maybe, just maybe, the man they had pinned their hopes on was more than just a soldier. He was a shield. And somewhere deep in the forest where warlords still ruled and shadows whispered in strange tongues, the name Traoré was no longer spoken with contempt. It was spoken with caution, with respect, with fear.